Hey, let me make a smooth segue to Zach Keefer. Zach covers the Colts and the NFL for The Athletic and the host of the Andrew Luck podcast. It's a six-part series, 6 episodes of Luck on the Athletic Football Show feed or wherever you listen to your podcast. How did you come up with the thought of doing this, whether you were going to have any cooperation with Andrew Luck?
That's a heck of a segue, Dan. I appreciate it. Yeah, great question. Why now, right? Like, why do this project? And at first, I kind of resisted it. I wasn't ready to dive back in. I lived all of this covering the Colts the last couple of years, but for a couple of reasons. One, he's sort of like this mysterious figure in Indianapolis. He lives 5 minutes from the team facility. The specter of Andrew Luck still hangs over this franchise in a way where, you know, you go to Phillip Rivers, you go to Carson Wentz, you go to Matt Ryan, like they haven't found the next guy. And he's only 32 years old. And there's a lot of what ifs. And to be honest, when you dig into it, for a lot of reasons, I think it's one of the more interesting stories we've had in the NFL in a long time. It's incomplete and it's mysterious and it's surprising and it's just fascinating on a lot of levels.
What role does Luck play in the mystery here of not just disappearing, but not really commenting on disappearing?
Yeah, he's almost like a Bigfoot in this city. Like, if you go back, it's impossible to understate like how big of a decision it was for Jim Irsay to move on from Peyton Manning in 2012. And that's one of the early episodes. It's like that just wasn't ever supposed to happen. And it did. If you're going to move on from Peyton Manning, you move on for the next Peyton Manning, right? In a lot of ways. And then he was done when he was 29 years old and he walked away 15 days before the season. Like, I remember looking at that guy that night, looking in his face and thinking, what happened? Like, how did we get here? And that's what we try to answer. Like, how does the best quarterback prospect since John Elway end up walking away before he's 30 years old? And what happened to him since?
Have you talked to Luck?
Yes. We caught up. He's done no interviews since he retired. He's like a ghost, like I said. We've stayed in touch. We met. We had coffee for an hour and a half, all off the record. So I will honor that. He's not quoted. You can imagine my disappointment with that. But he thought about participating, which would have been a big deal. It would have been the first time he's talked since he retired. He ultimately declined. But to some degree, it's almost better that he's not in the podcast because so many people around him tell the stories that we never heard.
What were the warning signs that we should have seen?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's into episodes 3 and 4. Well, I'll go back to Stanford. So his first start as a quarterback, David Shaw is his offensive coordinator. In his first play, he scrambles out of the pocket. Instead of ducking out of bounds like a lot of quarterbacks, he drives his throwing shoulder into the safety, gets 2 yards, and he runs off the field, and Shaw is livid. And Luck says, I know, but I just had to do it. I just had to get one hit in, coach. And that's how he played. Like, that's how he played the rest of his career. And there was a lot of joy to his game early. I mean, he was running straight into linebackers and then picking them up off the field, right? Getting sacked by defensive linemen and saying, great hit. Like, these defenders thought this was a mind game. Like, he was just different. But that beating, that physical punishment he took, and the fact that the Colts never got him a good offensive line, the signs were there. I remember so many hits he would take. The press box would just gasp. Like, you just don't see quarterbacks take those kind of hits. There was one game he took a shot to his ribs and it lacerated his kidney, which is an accident that usually happens when you're in a car crash. And he woke up the next day and he was peeing blood. So the warning signs were certainly there.
Yeah, I look at it, and I don't know if he's ever pointed fingers here, whether, and you can't say this if he said it privately off the record, but, you know, the snowboarding accident, the way he played, yes, they didn't protect him. And I used to rail on the Colts. It was like, you know, you got to protect him, but he wasn't protecting himself. And I don't think he's ever pointed any fingers of blame, or has he, that maybe I've missed here?
Yeah, no, that's a big part of this. Like, no, they didn't protect him, but he played like a linebacker. And he's a tough, big dude, right? Could have played tight end, could have played linebacker, but like, You can't do that. And so I have teammates that are saying, like every time he took a hit, like we cringed, like we knew if he goes down, the season's over. And there's a really revealing moment in the podcast where I asked David Shaw, and he's really close to Luck to this day, one of the few people that's really inside that circle. And I said, did the Colts protect Andrew Luck the right way? Did they build around him the right way? And Shaw says, and he's a coach for 20 years, he says, that's the most loaded question I've ever been asked in my life. And then he answered me and he said, during those early years in Indy, he would ask Luck. And Andrew never publicly criticized anybody. That just wasn't his thing. But privately with Shaw would be like, what do you need, man? He's like, I need a running back. Like they went 5 years without a 100-yard rushing, 5 years. And he needed an offensive line. So it's twofold. Andrew's not absolved of blame in this. And then the series gets into that. I mean, he played reckless football and he paid a really dear price.
He had the foot ankle injury a week before. Like, I guess, did that speed up the process of him saying, I just don't want to go through this anymore? Or what role did that play?
That's the weirdest thing in all this. Like, can I be honest? Like, nobody retires from a calf injury. Like, what? Like, this dude made it back from shoulder hell. Like, his throwing shoulder he played on for 3 years, the labrum was torn. Like, that's serious pain. He played through a lacerated kidney and beat the best defense in football 1 year. And a calf injury is what does it. But, that's really what episode 6 is about, is like after the shoulder and after he made it back, everything was different. He saw the game differently. And I think when he looked ahead and he saw more rehab and more missed time and more hell, which he'd lived through, I think he chose his mental health above everything else. And it's an extremely polarizing decision in this city to this day.
How is he viewed?
Better now. People have gotten over it. Now, the feedback from this podcast has stirred that back up. I mean, this is a guy that retired 15 days before the season opener. The Colts didn't have a plan.
Well, they booed him that night when Schefter had the report and he's on the sidelines, and it breaks during a preseason game. And they started booing him.
It's surreal. Yeah, the face of the franchise. The guy you moved on from Peyton Manning for is booed off the field. They need to get him back to Lucas Oil Stadium, and they need to celebrate him the right way. And I think Jim Irsay, the owner, wants to do that. But like I said, there's this specter. I mean, this guy lives 5 minutes from the team facility. And when I met with him, we had this great conversation. I remember looking at him and thinking, you're still 32 years old. Like, you could go play tomorrow. And he's not going to. He's not going to come back. I've never thought that. But it's just really strange that this unfolded the way it did. And it just kind of feels unfinished in a lot of ways.
The role of being a dad, what role did that play in all of this?
Yeah, he essentially became a full-time dad. Imagine walking away from football, which is a 12 hours a day job every day of the year, right? And then they have a baby a couple months later. So he's really thrown himself into that. And we're starting to see him come out publicly a little bit more. I think there was, and this is my word, I think there was a little bit of shame on his part, the way his retirement happened, when it happened. We didn't see him. He was like a ghost for like 2.5 years. I would get text messages and people would say, I saw him at the grocery. He's alive. I saw him at this coffee shop. Like, it was like Bigfoot. And he's starting to come out a little bit more and a little bit more. I think he's at peace with everything. It was hard at first, though. Why did he
stay in Indianapolis?
Great question. He loves it here. He loves it here. His wife has a great job. They love the food. They love the people. They love the fact that he can sort of blend in a little bit. People don't bug him. When we had coffee, a couple people double take. Like, is that Andrew Luck? Is that really him? And they would come up to the table, and he was great. He was great with them. So I think he's comfortable here. But isn't that telling? I mean, you walk away from a team at 29 and you stay in the city, and not just that, you live a couple minutes from the team facility.
Great stuff, Zach. Good luck with it.
Thanks, Dan.
That's Zach Keefer. He covers the Colts and the NFL for The Athletic. And get all 6 episodes of Luck on the Athletic Football Show feed or wherever you listen to podcast.